And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, yeah.
All right, everybody. Eric Dim, your most complained cop, NYPD. This is New York's finest retired unfiltered podcast, bringing you 265 Police Live series. Of course, with me is the founder and the co-host of the podcast, John McKay, retired lieutenant. Got a great episode talking about the NYPD under fire by the Department of Investigations for social media policies and violations. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about John Shell, who's at the center of it. John, what are your thoughts?
So John Shell and the NYPD as a whole are under investigation by the Department of Investigations for their social media practices. It's been well documented on this podcast, their unprofessional social media. The tweets that they're honing in on, though, however, are tweets that John Shell tweeted at Tiffany Caban. She's a socialist, cop-hating member of the New York City Council. In full disclosure, I had tweeted at Tiffany Caban the same two tweets that John Shell's under fire about. And everyone's like, I don't understand. He's kind of saying the same thing you're saying. What's your problem with him? And I'm like, I don't have a problem. I just think it's completely unprofessional. It's one thing for me to give an opinion, for you to give an opinion, for Eric to give his opinion. But for someone who's representing what's supposed to be an apolitical organization, there are ways to push back in inaccuracies in reporting, but this isn't it. And he's partaking in political activity, which is a violation of the patrol guide, as well as the claim is he's electioneering, which is illegal. It's illegal for a city manager to take part in that. He should know better. He is a city manager. He's a 3-star chief. I'll read one of the tweets. I've read it out on this podcast before. And then, Eric, let's get your thought on that tweet. And then I'll read the second tweet after that. So this tweet I had read out before. Tiffany Caban tweeted Pew, PHEEEWWWW. John Shell quote tweeted her the same thing, Pew. He said, under this mayor's leadership, we have saved over 700 people from being shot in the city. Pew, under this mayor, thousands of gun arrests protecting our most vulnerable communities. Pew again. Under this mayor, crime is down while fighting these ridiculous policies that your friends put in place and he inherited. Policies hurting everyday New Yorkers in our cities. TikTok, as I travel through the city and spend my time doing media just about every day, the community always asks me what we can do to help. I say to all New Yorkers, if you want change, vote the change you seek. Be well.
So it's interesting. It's always been the culture of the NYPD to do more and say less. Let's talk about DCPI. That is the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information. That's the Central Public Information Office for the NYPD. When I got on the job, and John, you got on the job 2004, we were instructed back then not to speak to the media. And it wasn't because we're idiots or morons, but it was for that exact reason. It's to keep a tight, controlled environment for the NYPD to never give the appearance of being political. Because it's very easy to twist information, especially on social media. Now, as we've gotten to this social media era, we have to be even more careful. So back then, John, I'm sure you remember, if we were on a shooting scene, a crime scene, something where the media would be present with press passes, they would love to talk to cops. So we were always told to say, refer to DCPI. What does that mean? Deputy Commissioner of Public Information. And for that reason, so that there's no appearance of impropriety or any appearance of taking sides with any political party or showing any emotion. And that's why we have a public information office, a centralized office that should disseminate that kind of information. And especially with this police department now, this administration, there's no direct leadership of an actual voice that's representing the police department, which should be the police commissioner. It shouldn't be the police commissioner speaking at times. It shouldn't be Kaz Daughtry, Deputy Commissioner of Operations. It shouldn't be John Shell, the Chief of Patrol. I mean, just clearly, it looks like the inmates are running the asylum. We do not have direct control of the police department. There's no structure. There's no actual leadership anymore. And let's go even further than that. If John, yourself, or myself, or Sal Greco, anyone that's vocal right now on YouTube, former cops, now turned YouTube, if we, at the time when we were on the job, if we had publicly expressed our opinions on social media the manner that we do now, just as John Shell is doing, we would probably face some serious discipline, especially now with the disciplinary matrix. We would probably be facing with aggravating factors, termination. It's a terrible look for the police department. The police department is supposed to be stoic and professional. There are ways to push back. This is not the way. It's a terrible look to get into pissing matches. It looks so immature. It looks unprofessional, and it actually weakens the police department. It doesn't give an appearance of strength. And the police department should give an appearance of strength, and that's through peace and being apolitical. So let's get into that. Let's talk about what mannerisms or what opportunities do we believe that the police department could have in pushing back.
Well, one, I just want to say that, like, I personally believe they should be under criminal investigation for the actions they've taken against myself, Eric, and this podcast. But we're going to knock all that out. We're not going to talk about that right now. We're going to just talk about these tweets and exactly what they're under investigation for. Now, this tweet is ridiculous, and now I went at her on the same tweet, but right here, he's just completely blowing the mayor. Like, let's just get that out there. He's just saying, under this mayor, under this mayor, under this mayor. It's actually disgusting. And then the pew, and then he says, vote the change you seek, right? And that what they're saying is that's electioneering. To me, it sounds like that's electioneering. So just taking this one tweet on face value, it's unprofessional, it's opinionated, it's political, right? And if any member of the NYPD were to do that, like you said, they would be heavily disciplined. If somebody with as much time as John Shell had on the job and his rank and his experience, they would be given aggravating factors as per the disciplinary matrix. So although you might think this is a great thing, oh, the NYPD finally has a voice. I seen Vicky Palladino. She's very happy about the NYPD having a voice. And a lot of conservatives are saying, oh, this is a great thing. This is great. It's not. And I'm going to tell you why it's not. Because it's not being done professionally, and it's not being done opinionatedly and politically. So although you agree with John Shell today, when the chocolate administration decides to take Chief Token Paleface John Shell and scalp him and put some lefty lib in there who believes in social justice, and they're doing the same thing but with their own twinge, you're not going to be very happy about that, Vicky. You're not going to be very happy about that, Mr. and Mrs. Conservative, back to blue all the time, law enforcement. You're not going to be happy about that. And that's why the NYPD should, and all law enforcement agencies should remain apolitical. And again, John Shell serves people in this city that voted for Tiffany Caban. Now, I think that they're complete morons, but again, you're the NYPD. You will serve the people you agree with and the people you don't agree with, and you will not treat any of them different. You will treat them all the same. Now, if you want to say, what could they do? Put the information out there, and that's it, Eric. If Harry Siegel writes a story and he misquotes something, he says there's 10 murders when there's actually 7. Say, actually, I'm sorry, there was actually only 7 murders. Can you please correct the story? That's it. That's all that needs to be done. You don't need to be given a song and a dance. After he tweeted this one tweet, Eric, you remember that we played him in front of city council where the NYPD said they were going to change their social media practices, and they were going to review tweets before they went out. And today there was another city council hearing, and none of that has happened. And since that time, John Shell has doubled down.
Well, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because something that came to mind immediately was, first of all, I'm a firm believer that leadership sets the tone for an entire organization. In order for it to thrive, you need good leadership. To crumble, you need terrible leadership. But the message sent throughout the police department now is that you can actually have pissing matches with the public, which goes against the ideology of Civilian Complaint Review Board. if that's the case, we shouldn't even have a civilian complaint review board to monitor if cops are being discourteous or having any offensive language, because we've now opened Pandora's box to have pissing matches online. But does that mean that we're actually only going to express online? That opens the door also. Are we going to have political arguments, with cops on the street with citizens? Are we going to have public forums where cops are now arguing their ideology? And let's go one further. Is it possible, just as you said, that the next chief of patrol is in favor of mandates and says, you know what? I like mandates. We're going to mandate that every police officer has to be married. If you're not married, you're going to be terminated. Why? Because I believe in marriage. I think that marriage is important. Or someone's going to mandate that you have to go to church on the weekend. Or someone's going to mandate that you no longer can go to church. I mean, this whole ideology where the police department takes a political stance and shows sides towards electioneering is a huge problem, opens another door. Are we also going to have a chief of patrol that's now going to say whether he's pro-life or pro-abortion? We need to stay out of this mess. Our job is to carry out the law. That's our job, to make sure that the law is carried out. If laws are broken, we bring people into custody so that the courts can interpret it. But for us to interpret and have pissing matches, especially from the leadership, and to politicize our ideology, personalized, is a complete deviation from the police department. It is a police department, a paramilitary organization. It is not John Shell's police department. I think that's where we're missing the mark. Am I right, John? This is not Kaz Daughtry's police department. This is New York City's police department. It's not even Mayor Eric Adams' police department. How can we even solidify that? Because every 4 years we have an opportunity to re-elect a new mayor. And also police officers, including John Shell and Kaz Daughtry, they may not want to believe it, but they will not be on the police department forever. They will age out at some point, and we will pass the torch. It is the department of the city of New York. It's not John Shell's police department, and it's not Kaz Daughtry.
Kaz Daughtry often does say, though, because he knows he's really the police commissioner, but he doesn't want everyone else to know that. So he often says, though, Ed Caban's police department. Police Commissioner Edward Caban. It's not his police department either. It's not. Eric, you're 100% correct. It's New York City Police Department. So the tweet that really gets opened up now is these lefties goes nuts about the theatrical response the NYPD did to Columbia, right? They bring in the Bearcat. They have the kids in the khaki pants who are completely untrained to go on there. They have them go through the window instead of ESU, instead of SRG, the people who are trained to use that. They want the theatrics. They want, these are our elite 2-year wonders. They're going to go through the window. Everyone could see their khaki pants better, so it'll be better. So they send them up through, risk their lives. They do a whole theatrical response. The flag, we went into that on an episode or two ago, how we thought that was just a complete photo op. Theatrics. It was all theatrics, everything. They told everybody crime, nothing happened. There were no incidents, complete lie. When there was a round let go and there were numerous injuries. But they lied to the public, complete theatrical response. Anyway, the lefties go nuts, and that's because of the leadership, what they did. They go nuts. So Tiffany Caban, far left socialist, member of city council, she puts out a statement about the response to the Columbia protests, to the Columbia riots, to the Columbia burglary, to the Columbia hostage situation. She puts out a completely unhinged response that the police department, they instigated the whole thing. They didn't de-escalate. Just completely ridiculous. It's completely unhinged response. Not even really worthy of the police department to respond to it. I did respond to it. I did quote tweet her. I forget exactly what I said. And 1 hour later, after I did that, John Shell tweeted this. I started to read this garbage, and I quickly realized this is coming from a person who hates our city and certainly does not represent the great people of New York. But I did manage to play the word replacement game, and it goes like this. Last night's criminal conduct by entitled, non-accountable students and the support they received from Councilmember Tiffany Caban is a colossal disgrace, a horrifying affront to democracy, and a proper behavior from people who are not accountable for their behavior. This was an abject failure on how civilized people are expected to behave in society while continually acting like a perpetual victim. Remember, everyone, if you want the change, seek the change you want by getting involved, then you know what to do. So he doubles down on the electioneering thing. He erases this tweet. Backlash, newspaper articles everywhere about it, that he erased the tweet, here's the tweet. Now he comes back over and he rewrites the whole tweet again, and he says, like, he starts to say it was an accident. He's telling the news it was an accident. I didn't mean to erase it. And then he says, like I said, it was an accident. I'm back. And he retweets that same exact statement. What do you think about that second statement he said to Tiffany Cabana?
I think if you close your eyes and you didn't know who wrote that statement, and you just listen to it, someone say it like on audible, just as you said it, you would think that someone is running for political office. That's exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like, honestly, it sounds like a great campaign for someone that would be running for local office. That's exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like he's electioning himself. It sounds like he's campaigning John Shell. It seems like he has aspirations for eventually some type of political career. I'm not sure what side of the aisle he's on. Sometimes he's Republican, I'm sure, at home. And in public, when he says under this mayor, he's a progressive. He's for or against. Very similar to what he's learned by Mayor Eric Adams. He's for or against whatever it works. But this is just deterioration of the police department. It's so unprofessional. This is absolutely an abomination. I'm embarrassed by it. How can we expect the police department to actually go out and execute the law, being emotionally detached, without infecting the law with their ideology? When he puts out a statement, it sounds like he's running for political office. I think I understand what some of the Republicans are saying. Even Vicky Paladino, I get it. Sexy. Wow, the police department's pushing back. Frankly, people are tired of what's been going on pre-George Floyd, post-George Floyd. The lefties have taken over, sidelined the entire police department profession. They've enacted legislation that has made the quality of life for New York City residents just an abomination, which is leading to the Great Escape, and we see it throughout the entire country. But this is not the way to fight back. The way that he's fighting back, it sounds like it's like being a Nazi stormtrooper, using the weight of the police department, and that's not how this country runs. Yes, you could vote better and you could vote different, but it's not John Shell's place to do that. Absolutely not. It doesn't sound like it. It's also the weight of the police department. I think it also affects us doing the ability to do the job, because just as we did on a prior episode, Sergeant Antonopoulos, if I'm saying it correct, completely politicized his ideology when he was dealing with Laura Loomer. When he was browbeating her, as Sal Greco would say, I love that word, when he was browbeating her to not report a crime because he was dealing at the Roosevelt Hotel with illegal aliens. Now, that's complete politics that has affected. But how can we actually put our foot down and say he's wrong when his leadership, because there's a small unit leadership breakdown, when his leadership, John Shell, is personally having piss-in matches, politicizing his ideology, and pretty much running for political office? How can we at every level maintain this culture of being apolitical when it's done by the chief of patrol, one of the most highest ranking members of the New York City Police Department? We can't expect that. We can't expect the entire police department to follow certain policies, but yet their leader, who's supposed to implement and set the example, does not. I think this is an abomination. I think this is actually could infect public safety for the entire city, and even through the entire state. And this could infect people's ideology when they now go vote. Now, what happens also? What if you are an underling of John Shell? And what if you are a complete progressive? And what if you like Tiffany Cabana? What if Tiffany Cabana is running for some type of office, and I don't agree with her, I think she's a complete wacko, but what if she's running for office and you decide that you want to vote for her? Would you feel possibly that you couldn't vote for her because maybe John Shell will actually bounce you out of a unit, or maybe you won't get the unit that you want because you didn't vote under his ideology? What are your thoughts on that? Because I think that's another thing that could affect the police department.
Well, I honestly think that these are the two stupidest tweets. So I think it's amazing that this is what he's under investigation for. Saying that I'm going to control the narrative, we're going to push back at the misinformation when he can't point to any misinformation, but we've pointed out many times the misinformation that himself, Kaz Daughtry, Ed Caban, Eric Adams have put out, and he can't respond to any of that because they are spreading misinformation and blatant lies. So I find it funny that it's these two tweets that they go after that puts him under investigation. There were so many more unprofessional tweets. I mean, the time when he attacked me about being a BMS warrior, all through innuendos. Oh, regular Bob the Builder. The guy's a clown. Honestly, the guy's a complete clown. I do believe Kaz Daughtry put him up to it, and I believe Eric Adams put them all up to it. But I ultimately think John Schell will be the fall guy. I'm going to put out the last tweet that he said that was unprofessional. They've been very quiet now. There was a city council meeting here today, the second budget hearing for 2025 for the budget. John Schell and Kaz Daughtry were noticeably absent from that. Apparently, they were told not to go by New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who's on his way to go meet with the Pope. So the Pope's going to be blessed with actually meeting a religious figure as such as Eric Adams. God sent, so he's going to go and bless the Pope. Other people say it's the other way around, but not Eric Adams. If you ask Eric Adams, he's going to be the one blessing the Pope with his presence. So
John, is he the Pope? Is he the Pope? Is he the Pope of New York City?
He's the Pope of Greenwich Village, Eric Adams, the Pope of Ireland. He loves himself. He's the best thing ever, and God loves him too. So this is the last thing that John Schell put out before him and Kaz Daughtry go radio silent and no more attacks on anybody. This is it. Lastly, no matter what complaints we receive to silence us, it won't work. We are going to tell our story, protect our city, defend our cops, and push back against a disingenuous narrative from a small number of people who never want the NYPD to succeed. We realize people have not been prepared for our voice, but I suggest they get used to it. It appears the smallest voices were making the loudest noise, but the vast majority of New York City and beyond support our work to keep our city safe. We are reaching millions, and it brings comfort to New York, working class New Yorkers. Have a great week in the greatest city in the world, New York. That was the last thing, and then he hides from the New York City Council, and he goes radio silent, him and Kaz Daughtry, on the internet. Weird statement that they would never be silenced, and now they're silent.
What's interesting? They talk about pushing back, right? The verbiage that was used towards police officers during the George Floyd riots, the signs that were posted, people were carrying back then, were far worse and far more egregious than we actually see now towards cops. When it was the defund police movement, it was kill cops, it was kill pigs. How come he wasn't pushing back then? It's quite interesting to me, right? It's only 4 years ago. But how come John Schell was not so vocal? Why was he not on social media back then? Why was he not standing up for the cops, saying we should not defund the police because the police are an intricate part to public safety in New York City? Why did he not push back to the disbandment of anti-crime, which obviously he thinks is effective because the tan pants are a quasi-anti-crime type of unit? Why wasn't he pushing back then? And it was far more egregious towards police then. Isn't that quite interesting? Kaz Daughtry, when he was a detective driving around Chief Madry, why did he push back then? Why were they not on social media then? What has changed? I'm sure you're going to pinpoint it right now. I know exactly what's changed. What has changed, John? Let's tell the public, because I know exactly what you're going to say.
Sorry about that. My mic unplugged. So I don't know if I'm going to get it right, but I would say Eric Adams changed. That's what changed in the NYPD. The Eric Adams administration, the Get Stuff Done team, is what changed in the NYPD. John Schell was a commanding officer. We learned today that commanding officers have free roam to use their social media account. Now, I know that's not true. Eric knows that's not true. Every commanding officer on here and a lot of their subordinates also know that that's not true. If the commanding officer did respond to some unhinged wacko on social media, they would be immediately told to take down that post and not do that again. as well as if they decided to block anybody, they would be told to unblock people. I mean, and that's happened time and time again in the New York City Police Department. We're all aware of that, right? Because essentially you're cutting off police services now. Although social media isn't monitored 24/7, it's apparent under this administration it is. It's apparent that my social media, Eric's social media, and Sal Greco's social media is monitored 24/7. That's without a doubt, you know. So that social media has become a big thing. And again, you know, I understand where Vicky Palladino and honestly, a lot of the people that support us too are like, oh, you guys are ridiculous. You just got an axe to grind. You know, Sal got fired. You two got forced out. You guys just have an axe to grind with this administration. And I guess it could appear that way. I have an axe to grind about the social media practices that were done towards myself, Eric, and the podcast and our children. Now that I believe they should be arrested for and criminally charged for. These two tweets, I'm really just giving my honest opinion. They're unprofessional. He violated numerous aspects of the NYPD patrol guide, as well as the city charter when it comes to electioneering, as well as he was rude and disrespectful, which we're told never to do in the New York City Police Department, right? So I believe he should be held to the same standard that he should be held to he should be held to a higher standard than the standard that's enforced against the rank and file of the NYPD. So while this may appear that, oh, what's the big deal? It's a very big deal when you put all of that into account. When you take all of that into account of why this is going on and why now, it becomes a very big deal. And then what happens today in the meeting, Eric? Ed Caban won't say whether he agrees with it, if it's appropriate or not.
What a loser. First of all, as I said, and I say it all the time, he's the most insignificant police commissioner we've ever seen or ever heard of throughout the police department history. I mean, think of prior commissioners, like the esteem of what you think of when you think of a police commissioner. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was a police commissioner for the New York City Police Department. Can you compare Teddy Roosevelt and Ed Caban? Could we actually put them in the same conversation? I mean, he's a police commissioner. This is a high political office. I mean, we see aspirations for police commissioners, maybe not the past couple that we've had, but I mean, look, some of the commissioners we've had in the past are high esteemed, intelligent people that are well known to the public. Bill Bratton, whatever you think about Bill Bratton 1 or 2, he's still well known to the public. The entire country knows who he is. He's well respected, and if he puts out a tweet, it's well read and it's well heard. Ray Kelly, well respected throughout the entire nation. Bernard Kerik, despite his issues, even with his lack of these steps of going through the police department ranks, he's well known throughout the public. He's held himself in high esteem and showed some great leadership within the New York City Police Department, also corrections. So to compare these two and to compare Ed Caban, it's just it's outrageous. But I think this was an opportunity for him to make a great statement and actually take ownership. And that's what true leaders do. Police Commissioner Ed Caban could have said, you know what? Under my leadership, this violates all policy. However, we have went through a time of duress and stress, and I'm going to take care of it and correct it. And going further, these are the measures we will take. But he didn't do that. Instead, he said, the DOI is going to investigate it. I guess it's not my police department. I mean, no one's taking ownership. You're the police commissioner. Oh, I'm free from a DOI is going to do it. So who are you? Who are you? You're nobody. What happened to small leadership breakdown? Listen, there's a great book by Jocko Willemick, The Dichotomy of Leadership. And his first one is great too, Extreme Ownership. And he talks about taking ownership at every level. But especially you're the police commissioner. You're not taking ownership. You should say the buck stops with me. I'm the police commissioner. This is what happened. You've expressed your concerns. We are going to fix it. John Shell, yes, these tweets are maybe necessary in some ways, but it should come up on behalf of the police department. From now on, I will put out these tweets on behalf of the department, not on behalf of John Shell, but as the police commissioner, I'll make sure it's on behalf of the police department. He didn't do that. And it looks extremely weak for him to say, well, DOI is investigated it. I mean, ultimately, I have the last say in discipline. And then after the investigation, this is your police department. You should say, excuse me, This is the police department of the city of New York. And as the police commissioner, I will make sure that our culture and our representation of the police department is maintained. But he shows no backbone. He doesn't show any emotional IQ, any intelligence. He is so insignificant. It just looks absolutely ridiculous that they have the attorney speaking on me. He's the only one that's holding the ground. I mean, they're completely gaslighting and lying to everyone, but he's absolutely insignificant. It's embarrassing to watch. It sure is. And you know what? I just wanted to mention one more thing, John. You're absolutely right. The reason why they're on social media in the manner that they are is one, Eric Adams, because it's always about leadership. And under his leadership, this is what's allowed. And number two, the reason why is because the pushback is on the small voices. Who are those small voices? Hello? Me, you, Sal Greco, and a couple of people that are out there. But those are the small voices. Small voices with big steps. And if you don't like it, John Shell, too bad, so sad. Guess what? If you want, retire, and then you can have the opportunity to have your voice as John Shell. But right now, you continue to be a chief of patrol of the New York City Police Department, so accept it and be professional. If you can't, this is not the profession for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to play a clip now. It opens up with I cut out the part with the speaker, Adrian Adams, and basically she's just asking what do they think about the tweets from John Shell. So the 40-year-old version is going to speak. That's the Deputy Commissioner of Legal Matters. The other 40-year-old version, Kaz Daughtry, he's not present at this meeting, and either is John Shell, Chief Token Paleface John Shell. So he's a big, tough guy on Twitter. All of you guys support it. The NYPD has a voice now. They're strong now. And then fast forward to this hearing, the two biggest voices don't show up. And just look at the incompetence here. Tell me you feel safe with these people. Seriously, somebody tell me, Vicky, tell me that you feel safe with these people in charge. Tell me. This is a complete, sheer, utter incompetence throughout. The only two people that are competent on this whole board right here are the 40-year-old version, the Deputy Commissioner of Legal Matters, and the Deputy Commissioner of Management and Budget, who got appointed about a week ago, by the way. She has better answers than everyone on this panel. And she actually could tell us she takes pride in her job more than anybody else up there. So we're going to open up with the 40-year-old version. Here we go.
There is a DOI investigation. We think it's important that be allowed to play out. We don't want to do anything that's going to compromise that investigation. We want to respect that investigation, respect the rights of the people involved in that investigation. And when that investigation is over, if history is any guide, DOI will issue a report to the public. I imagine whatever that report says, the city council will want to hear from us, but I do think it's important and necessary that we allow that investigation, that inquiry to play out as an independent investigation as requested by you.
No one is more excited than I am over that inquiry. And no one will be more excited than I will be to hear the results. Do you feel that post was appropriate?
Again, we're going to allow the DOI investigation to play out. I think that is critical. I don't
Do
think
you feel,
but I'm here speaking on behalf of the
Commissioner, do you
department.
feel that post was appropriate?
As you know, it's an active investigation. At that very end, I might be the arbitrator of discipline, so at this time, I cannot comment what's an active investigation.
Speaker Adams, if I may. It is important that investigation be allowed to play out in fairness for everyone involved, whatever one's view on the post.
Do you feel the post should have been deleted?
Speaker Adams,
Do you feel it was deleted improperly?
I am not.
Do you feel it should have come back?
Speaker Adams,
Commissioner, do you feel that the post was appropriate and should have been or should have been deleted?
It's appropriate for me to comment while the process is ongoing.
Speaker Adams, there
Did
is
you
an investigation.
instruct the chief to delete the post?
Speaker Adams, this is exactly what DOI is looking at.
Commissioner, did you instruct the chief to delete the post?
Speaker Adams,
I asked the chief a question.
I understand, and very respectfully, Speaker, very respectfully. I understand your questions. I do. This is precisely what DOI is looking at, these issues. And in fairness to everybody involved, separate and apart from the substance, it's a matter of process.
I think that
matter
that
of
was a very
fairness.
fair question for this hearing, sir.
Speaker Adams, given the DOI investigation,
The commissioner leads this department, sir.
yes,
I feel that was a very appropriate question for the leader of the NYPD to respond to this body.
it is also important to respect that investigation. There's a process here. There's, as you say, there are accusations being made against individual members of the department. There's a process for this. To sort of short circuit that process at this hearing, I don't think is appropriate.
I beg to differ with your consideration there, and I will continue on my line of questioning when it comes to the appropriateness of such posts. Are such posts today being permitted?
What do you think, Eric?
You know what's interesting? It's funny, right? First of all, I think she completely ridiculed Police Commissioner Ed Caban by saying, you are the leader of the department. I mean, she's actually kind of like just being completely sarcastic. She's actually joking on the same manner that we are. But isn't it funny that the 40-year-old virgin, that he said, I think it's inappropriate for you to ask these questions when it's under investigation by DOI. So you're able to show your emotion, say how you feel about her asking the question about it, but you couldn't say how you feel about the appropriateness of the tweet. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And also, you know what's interesting about it? This was just a budget hearing. It was an opportunity to answer a simple question. Ed Caban acted like he was a cop being deposed on a lawsuit, or he was at a CCRB investigation and he's asking me questions. I'm advised by counsel not to say anything. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. You're the police commissioner. You should take ownership. And this was an opportunity for you to put your big boy pants on and speak up. He sounded like he was getting deposed. Like, I'm advised by counsel not to say anything. Is that what's happening here? Are you being deposed? You're the police commissioner. This was an opportunity to push back and say, listen, I understand your concerns. You open up an investigation. Your DOI is overseeing it right now. I'm the police commissioner. I felt it's inappropriate because A, B, C, and D, and this is how we're going to move forward. I feel it's appropriate, and here's how we're going to move forward, even though it's in opposition of how you feel. Something. But to sound like you're being deposed, I actually question. I want to see his test scores. I question how he passed every exam because he sounded like a cop that was being deposed. Let me seek with counsel. Let the ball guy over there. He's going to keep talking. That was ridiculous. That's a police commissioner. Do you think Teddy Roosevelt would sit there and speak like that? Do you think Ray Kelly would say, I'm advised by counsel? Do you think Bill Bratton would say that? How about Keith Chansul? Would she do that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Embarrassing.
Sorry, my mic keeps messing up. Do you hear me all right? You're unplugged, dude. You're out too.
I put my mic on. That was
sorry.
Can you hear me? No, it's all good. No, I said it was
fault.
it was a couple of sound bites, but I think people get the picture. And I mean, honestly, he's the police commissioner. I want to reiterate, he sounds like a cop that is being deposed, and he's advised not to say too much. Listen, I have to speak with counsel. Who are you? You're the police commissioner? You're a joke. Honestly, you know what? Listen, I always try to show respect to people, even those I don't respect. But right now, we'll turn up the dial because it's ridiculous. This guy is the police commissioner. He's affecting every rank and file right now. You should be saying to yourself, if this guy has the right to be police commissioner, every one of the cops right now should be ordained as the police commissioner today. That's embarrassing. Well, this guy is responsible for public safety for the largest city in the entire nation. That's scary. I'm scared for every one of you. Thank God I'm not a New York City resident anymore. That's pathetic.
I agree. I mean, it's absolutely, that was absolutely disturbing to watch. You have the first person in charge, the New York City Police Commissioner, the NYPD Police Commissioner. He won't say if he thinks it's appropriate. What does that mean? What does that mean, Eric? That means that he's not in charge of the New York City Police Department. Because if John Schell and Cash Daughtry are going out there online and tweeting, and he can't say that he thinks it's appropriate, if he can't say, yes, I think it's appropriate, that means that it wasn't under his direction, right? She says, do you think it was appropriate that the tweet was deleted? Should it have been deleted? He can't answer the question. So that leads me to believe you're not the leader of the New York City Police Department. I agree 100% with you, Eric.
Bingo.
That she 1000% was mocking him. She was saying the leader of the police department. It was a joke. She knows he's not the leader. But you know who never gets anything? And you know, the second in charge is sitting right next to him, the Kamala Harris of the NYPD, Tanya Kinsella. She's sitting up there. Honestly, I watched almost the majority of that thing. And she spoke on the questions that were related to her, but she always kicked it to the deputy commissioner of management budget, or she kicked it to the chief of personnel, or she kicked it to someone else. And literally almost every single response that she gave, the city council asked somebody else a question. Didn't want to even ask her a question because it was that useless. I mean, when I look at that whole panel, again, I agree that Chief Jeffrey Madry should have been out years ago. If he had white skin, if he was a pale face, he was out years ago. Never mind all the scandals he's been involved in since. But I will say, he's the only one that could communicate properly to New York City Council and the community. The Deputy Commissioner of Legal Matters handled himself well for the circumstances. Not something I think he would advise them to do is go out there online. And again, the girl who's been in the NYPD for a week, I think performed the best. She knew her job. She actually watched the last city council hearing and saw where they didn't answer the city council's questions and answered them from the first time. So they kind of backed off of it and they said, all right, well, we feel confident that this person is getting a grasp on their job. But when you're talking, you have concerns with the department's social media practices. I don't have faith that I don't have faith that anyone sitting up here controls Kaz Daughtry or John Schell or anything they do. I mean, I know that Eric Adams must have told them to cut it out because they weren't at this meeting, which shows true cowardice, in my opinion. That shows exactly that they are everything that they are everything. They are not anything that they claim to be. They claim to be leaders. They have a very small percentage of people who say they're leaders, they're true leaders. They're not, because they would be here. They would be here with bells on. I wouldn't have been able to sleep, Eric. I would have been like, I'm going to that city council meeting. And if Eric Adams told me I can't go, I would have said, then suspend me. And even if you do, I'm showing up as a civilian because I'm going. I didn't do anything wrong, and I'm going to defend myself. But that's not what they did. They tucked tail down, and what are they doing? Dead quiet on social media since this. Now they're just tweeting the normal NYPD things, what used to happen prior to this podcast coming on. So I agree with you 1,000%. I mean, Ed Caban and Kamala Harris should be removed from the NYPD. They're completely ineffective. They're completely useless. There needs to be, and again, I think we said this on the last podcast, there needs to be a complete overhaul. Everybody on that dais. Goodbye.
I actually think that her line of questioning was well orchestrated. I think that it was coordinated. I think she knew exactly what she was doing when I referred to the council speaker, Adrian Adams. She completely exposed that there's no direct leadership within the police department, and that the inmates are running the asylum, and it's running amok. Just that one question itself. How do you feel about this post? And is it okay for it to be deleted? Because there's only two options here. One, you leave this department and you give the authority, or you don't leave this department and they're doing it with zero respect for your authority. Doesn't matter what you say, they'll do it anyway. Because you can't say, well, they did it without my knowledge. If they had respect for you and you actually had your foot on the pedal and your finger was on the pulse and you were the leader for the police department, they would actually know. They would know what lines should not be crossed because you would have already put your foot down immediately to let the police department know. As police commissioner, these are the boundaries. Anytime you're in a leadership position, especially a position of authority as police commissioner, there has to be boundaries that are delineated. People have to know that. Just if we could, I always say small unit leadership breakdown. That's why I say John Schell and Kaz Daughtry are directly responsible for the attacks on this podcast through social media. Because you, John Schell and Kaz Daughtry, either gave the authority and direction for the criminal response team to to attack this podcast on social media, to suppress our First Amendment speech and try to shut this podcast down. Or there's no respect for your authority because you never had any boundaries and they do it anyway. So honestly, it could be both because, hey, why wouldn't they do it? They see you having pissing matches with politicians, with media on social media. So why wouldn't they do it? You're supposed to set the example. But you know what's interesting about this, right? Vicky Palladino and many of these people, listen, I respect them. I understand their position. It's kind of sexy. Wow, the police department's fight back. Maybe we could have, we could get back public safety. And that's short-sighted, but we're not looking at the long game on this. But what's interesting about it is they say, oh, John Schell fought back. Why didn't John Schell fight back when the sergeant was suspended for throwing and ultimately indicted for throwing a cooler at a fleeing perpetrator, trying to stop that perpetrator, and that perpetrator unfortunately and tragically met his demise? But where was John Schell to support that cop? He said they were out there pushing back, supporting the cops. Where was John Schell on social media supporting Provenzano, the police officer that just got acquitted during his trial for being arrested for assault for an on-duty incident? Where is John Schell supporting Juan Perez in retirement, who's still fighting a court case? Where was John Schell supporting Eric Dibb for getting firearms or getting complaints and awards at the same time, simultaneously? Where was John Schell supporting John McCarry for his religious beliefs? Where was John Schell when Sal Greco was wrongfully terminated? Where was John Schell? But John Schell only cares about John Schell, and it shows.
So listen, I have no doubt in my mind that Kaz Daughtry and John Schell were directly involved in the attacks. I mean, they pretty much attacked them themselves as well. As plus, we have a lot of documented information that they sent their quote unquote dream team after us, who, by the way, I think just killed somebody, chasing someone for a traffic infraction, who then they were involved in a car pursuit and chasing someone for a traffic infraction and killed someone on New York City streets during that vehicle pursuit, like we have been saying time and time again. So I have no doubt, but let's just remove all that, Eric. Let's say that never happened. Let's say that John Schell and Kaz Daughtry never came after us. They never sent some cowardly captain and two lieutenants who really should no longer be employed by the New York City Police Department because they had low integrity when they were cops, never mind when they were supervisors, never mind when they were sergeants and lieutenants. But let's pretend that never happened and they never came after us. Let's just take these two tweets at its face and say this is the only thing that John Schell has done that has came to light in the controversy. You're the police commissioner. What would you do? What do you think do you think that they're appropriate? And if not, what do you think the appropriate discipline would be just based upon these two tweets, nothing else?
That's a great question, actually. If it was just these two tweets alone, I would absolutely put a stop to it immediately, and there would be some discipline. Just on these two tweets alone, I don't think he would be suspended or terminated. But if we look at the whole ball of wax, absolutely, I think they should be charged with a crime. But just these two tweets alone, politicizing himself amongst the police department, opens up Pandora box. I do think there should be discipline. I think he should have been demoted back to captain. Absolutely, because he doesn't understand his responsibility as the chief of patrol, the face of the police department. Absolutely, that would be my immediate response. I think that is completely misuse of the office of the police department. And as police commissioner, the boundaries would have already been set. If I was a police commissioner, or you were, I'm sure the boundaries would be set. And if someone took those actions, they would know they already violated those boundaries. So it would take action immediately. I think those tweets on itself are completely inappropriate. Absolutely.
I agree. I would discipline him. I would remove him from the chief of patrol spot. I don't know if I would demote him, but he would not be in a public facing position anymore. He would be the chief of something else, chief of personnel, something of that nature. I would take him immediately off the street, and he would have no access to his Twitter account again. And I would install other practices to ensure that people don't take it upon themselves to go on Twitter. Now, again, I don't believe that he went out by himself. I believe that Eric Adams put him and Kaz Daughtry up to it, but him per se, because like we said, he's the fall guy, right? When the thing hits the fan, everybody's going to turn their back on him. So what they tell him? They told him, don't go to the meeting. He didn't go. He hid. He was very silent at the last meeting. And now he's very, very quiet as a mouse on Twitter. Very strange for someone who said that he would not be silenced. Other thing I want to talk about, during this testimony, Ed Caban said that the NYPD has responded to over 2,400 protests since October 7th. It was also stated at this meeting, and I might have it wrong, and feel free to correct me for all the haters out there, but I'm going off the top of my head. I only watched this for 2 seconds. I didn't get a chance to rewind to do anything, but I believe there was $58 million just in overtime spent. That is only in overtime to police these protests since October 7th. So 58 million. So the cost to actually police these protests is hundreds of millions of dollars, right? If 58 million is the cost of overtime, what's the cost of it in total? It's probably $250 million, right? 2,400 protests. Apparently, social media is more important. Social media and the use of attacking your critics online is more important than quelling these 2,400 protests, right? Again, they're now saying that students are being radicalized, right? And they don't know how that's happening. They don't know how it's happening, but they've done nothing to identify who is actually radicalizing the students. And not only have they done nothing to identify it, they actually have a professor for Columbia as the deputy commissioner of intelligence who is supposed to identify who is radicalizing the students inside of Columbia. I mean, just on the face, Eric, what do you think about all of the things I said?
Well, like John said, we hit the mark again. We foreshadowed this. We talked about this on a prior podcast. First of all, the first thing we said before the police department ever made entry onto the campus at Columbia is that it would be great to have undercovers or some type of intelligence information being gathered at the campus to disseminate to the police department. And lo and behold, we didn't know because information from the police department is being omitted to the public, which is the same as a lie, that the Deputy Commissioner of Intelligence, Rebecca Weiner, is also a faculty member at Columbia University. That would be great information to know. And what did we say? We said, how do we know if she's not passing information to the police department from the campus or vice versa? What if she's giving information from the police department to the people at the campus? At the campus. And what's interesting, we foreshadowed. I said, if you remember, John, I said, I bet you that the police department, the mayor himself, is going to say that Rebecca Weiner was actually their mole getting the intel from the campus to pass to the police department. Sure enough, Eric Adams today said she was spying, that Rebecca Weiner herself was spying for the police department, getting information for the campus. You're shaking your head because we all know it's hogwash. It's all gaslighting. I mean, from the ideology to believe you need a letter, somehow Paul Revere is coming on horseback to give the police department information from the campus for the police department to respond. I don't know if this is 1800s or if this is, if this is Billy the Kid in Young Guns. This is just absolutely ridiculous. And then this conflict of interest, they admitted to the public, and now she was spying. Oh, spying. You needed her to spy to figure out that you have hostages? I mean, that people were under threat at this campus? Are you telling me that no one called 911? You didn't get any information? I find it hard to believe. This is so ridiculous. I can't believe that the public let themselves be gaslit by the New York City Police Department. I mean, look, that's your police commissioner. You just saw that public hearing. This is a complete moron. This is running the police department. Who's running the police department? Another moron. New York City Mayor Eric Adams. I feel sorry for the public. And it's amazing. You said there's 2,400 protests, maybe more than 2,400. And you know what? The way that they're policing, and this is your leadership, prepare for 2,400 more.
Oh, triple that by the summer. Forget about it. The warm weather's coming. 2,400. It was some cold nights in New York City, man. There was some bad weather. There's a lot of rain. Triple that when the summer comes. Forget about it. I'll be in New York City. I think I'm gonna document a couple of them. Maybe I'll even yell out some stuff while I'm there. But you know, it's interesting. Since we did the last podcast, I don't think we talked about that. there was a janitor came out and he was actually interviewed by the Free Press. And the janitor said that he was, not only was he held hostage, he said immediately upon them entering the building, they pulled all the fire alarms, which would mean there would need to be an immediate response from the fire department as well as the New York City Police Department. So apparently, a fire alarm is no longer an emergency in New York City. You still need a letter from a university for the fire department and the New York City Police Department to respond to a fire alarm. So any private property out there, I think I would start drafting a letter and get them to Kaz Daughtry on horseback or telegram. There is a procedure on how to send telegrams to the New York City Police Department. We'll pull that up out of the archives and send it to you. And hopefully they still have that telegram machine in the NYPD that they could get it. This way, in case, God forbid, there is a fire alarm in your building, the NYPD and the FDNY could respond. So they completely ignored that. Completely ignore that. And I agree with you 100%, Eric. Total gaslighting. The fact that Rebecca Wieners, the Deputy Commissioner of Intelligence, shows how unintelligent the New York City Police Department is, and shows how they're not trying to identify who's actually radicalizing these students. One, we know it's the professors, right? We know that the professors are radicalizing these. The courses themselves, if you just listen to some of them, they're ridiculous. I mean, they're things like the course itself. I'm like, I look at college courses from time to time because I still want to, not because I need a degree or I want one. I just like to take a class here and there on things. But some of the classes I want to take just to fight, just to argue. And I could pick those classes out just by the title. Just by the title of the class. I'm like, yeah, I'm failing that class. Let me take that class. You know, and that's basically the majority of classes you're going to see in Columbia and Harvard and these sociology classes. They're ridiculous. And the professors are radicals. They're radicals and they're radicalizing these students. But the other way is that they're being radicalized by not-for-profits and by non-government organizations who are funding these protests. They're funding these protests. They're funding these sit-ins. They're funding all this stuff, and they're paying outside agitators. The NYPD is not gaslighting about that. They're just terrible at communicating to the public and to the media. And that's why everyone's like, are there really outside agitators? Absolutely are. There are paid outside agitators. And they haven't identified anybody since October 7th. And I personally believe that is being done on purpose, because I believe that anybody, including Rebecca Wiener, could actually find out who's funding these protests and who's behind radicalizing these students, but they don't want to find out, in my opinion.
Like John said, talking about the outside paid agitators and who's actually funding this, and I always say follow the money, and you say the same thing. You know what, John? I think, and this is a bold statement to make, I think they know who the outside paid agitators are. I think they know who the organizations are. I think they know where the money's going. We have the best intelligence. I think that Rebecca Wiener actually knew who was there that was an outside paid agitator or who was part of actually organizing, coordinating this event. I think that's the intel that was passed on. It's obvious that the police department responded so slowly with this leg to allow these agitators and these organizers of this actual riot itself to leave the premises, for the police department to go in and actually arrest the low-hanging fruits. Put on a big show. We talk about theatrics. They put on a big show. Yeah, so they put themselves in harm's way with the people that are still there. Yes, but I think that the people they're arresting are low-hanging fruits. They're part of the violence, but they're not part of the orchestration and actually coordinated event. I think this is all done by design. I think they know who they are. And if they have no idea who they are, that's even scarier. But we know the police department. We both worked for almost 20 years in the police department, and the intelligence in the police department is pretty good. And not only that, we know that there are paid informants that are definitely providing information to the city. They want to get paid. I would put my last dollar on it that the New York City Police Department knows exactly who's funding this, who paid for it, who was there. Because one thing I know, and especially being a special operations lieutenant, money makes people talk. We used to get a lot of great information from confidential informants to solve homicides. When we would arrest people, and someone with a legal firearm, you bring them in, and then flip them into an informant, and have them provide information, they would get a lot of cash. I used to joke around and say, you know what, my next life, I'm going to be an informant. Money talks. So I don't believe this for a second. They know exactly who they are.
Well, of course they do. If any of you guys don't follow him already, I suggest you follow Jason Curtis Anderson. I believe he's at JC Anderson is his hashtag, as his at on X. But he's actually discovered some pretty interesting things. What he'll do is he'll show you the group, the radical group, and what they're saying, like the anti-West, that they want to take down the United States. And then he'll actually show you who's funding them. So he actually shows one about the Muslim American Society of New York. They're actually in Staten Island. And he put some videos out about some radical statements that are being made by this group. And then he shows who's funding them. And guess who's funding them? You are. New York City taxpayers are funding them, right? Just like I said, when are we going to identify? When are we going to identify which groups are receiving money from New York City? And why are they still receiving it? You know who they're receiving it from? They're receiving it from New York City Speaker Adrian Adams, who we just sided with on one issue. But on this issue, we're far from, because I believe this is aiding and abetting. So I believe there needs to be an investigation into her, into Justin Brannan, into former New York City councilman who ran against Justin Brannan, Ari Kagan. They all funded this group with money. Money just continuously flows from New York City. And this is just one group, by the way. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of these groups. And the majority of their money comes solely from New York City taxpayer funds. So that's why the New York City Police Department doesn't want to identify, because if they identify them, it's going to open up a can of worms. It's going to be a political nightmare. But it doesn't matter, because what we're seeing is Western society's under attack, our culture's under attack. New York City is really truly under siege at this point. It's a dangerous hotbed. It is like, it's like something that could just explode at any minute. And instead of actually doing anything, New York City Police Department continues to pour gasoline on it and be like, no, don't worry about what's going on. Look over here. Look at this fancy thing over here. And it's a scary time right now, man, especially with these idiots in charge. I mean, as much as you could sit there and say that the adults in the room here, New York City Speaker Adrian Adams looks like the adult in the room, she isn't. So it's scary, man, because really, who's in charge in New York City? Radicals and idiots that they appointed. That's who's in charge in New York City.
Well, I say all the time, New York City on every level is infected on all different angles. It's not just the police department. Of course, we're most vocalized about the police department expressive. That's our forte. We spent almost 20 years with the police department of peace. And that's so significant. And also the crusade that we're on, talking about the direction the police department has gone, being affected with politics. But yeah, I don't think Adrian Adams is a savior either. I just laugh because even she, as radicalized and dumb as she is, was able to pull Ed Caban's card. So I just find it laughable because she's a complete idiot herself. I think the New York City Council is completely affected. The legislation that they have made has also put gasoline in the fire. The protest settlement itself has enabled these riots to continue and just hurdle for the police department. But the police department at the same time doesn't even understand that they're actually helping them because of the ideology they've taken, the footsteps that they've taken, this gaslighting, this ideology to believe there's a telegram. The whole entire city, actually, at this point, elected officials, politicians, the police department, we need a complete overhaul. Leadership at every level has broken down the police department. It's unfortunate. Listen, John and I support the rank and file, but we have spoke to some of the cops within the police department. Not the overwhelming majority. The overwhelming majority, yes, they're doing a fantastic job. We spoke to some cops who are quite unprofessional. We see it's because of leadership. So I won't excuse everyone that's there. But the entire city is just infected. It always comes to leadership. Mayor Eric Adams is at the focal point, and he is a large part of the breakdown of this leadership. He can put a stop And he could change and curb things that have happened with the city council, the protest settlement itself. But he's done nothing. Nothing. There's a skill when you're in a leadership position to managing people below you, which would be the police department. And there's also skill to managing people above you. And he could say, listen, I work for Governor Hochul. She is the governor of the state. However, I am not in agreement when it comes to bail reform. And these are the changes need to be based on my experience. That would be managing up. You're still being respectful, but he's not doing that. When he has the opportunity, exactly what John says, he's for it. He'll shake hands. He'll say he's alliance with Governor Hochul. And when he has the opportunity, he'll say he's against things. And he'll say it, on a news station he speaks of. Absolutely terrible leadership. And the worst part about it, he is at the focal point right in the middle of this whole thing. I think the city is going to implode. Absolutely. It's imploding from within. It really is sad for anybody that lives in New York City right now. My heart goes out to you because you could watch these. You watch. Listen, we're showing you the information. We're not getting any confidential information. We're showing you what's out there, and we're just analyzing, giving our perspective. But you can see for yourself. Common sense would tell you that's the New York City Police Commission. All you have to do is just ask yourself: would Teddy Roosevelt give those answers? I mean, look it up. He was a police commissioner for New York City. That's the esteem. This is the standard that we think of. I mean, when you join the New York City Police Department, John and I know, Teddy Roosevelt is revered. You see pictures of him at the police academy. Will we one day see pictures of Ed Caban? Will we see pictures of him in Qatar? Will we see pictures of him with his pink tie shaking his head? I doubt it.
I mean, listen, like I said, I think that social media practices need to change. I don't think it needs to go back to being completely silent. I think that they could correct the record. I think it could be done professionally. I just think the way they've been going about social media, they've been trying to be like myself and Eric and Sal. I'm shocked they didn't start with the memes. I'm shocked, honestly, because that's where they were headed at a point. But I don't think that these are the people that should be in charge of putting out any information. They're completely unprofessional. And, I really don't know what else to say about that. I mean, does the department deserve to be under investigation for its social media practices? Absolutely, they do. I believe that they need to be under investigation for a lot of the tweets, not just the two that we highlighted. And I also believe they need to be under criminal investigation for what happened to myself, Eric, and this podcast, and a few other people. Again, we didn't really talk about it on the show, but there's a rape victim who says that John Schell smeared her name and threatened to tell everybody that she was raped, and then ran around New York City telling everyone that she tried to get an innocent black man locked up. When it turned out that wasn't the case at all. She was actually raped. And Jeffrey Madry had his dream team, Detective Kaz Daughtry, investigate the sexual assault case. And he botched the control call. So the DA's office said that it wasn't strong because they needed sex crimes. They needed NYPD special victims on that case. And Kaz Daughtry went ahead when he was detective, botched the whole control call, told us she was good when in fact the call wasn't good and they needed more evidence. And they basically said that they would take the case, but they don't believe that they had a lot of evidence to prosecute because the control call was botched. So she decided not to go forward with the case. And she said that John Schell ran around smearing her name after she was very outspoken about the New York City Police Department after the Floyd riots. Now, this is a girl who owns a not-for-profit, Dana Ranchlin, who was in-house in Brooklyn North precincts. She was so in-house in Brooklyn North precincts that most Brooklyn North cops thought she was a cop or thought she worked for the police department, but she didn't. And then after she spoke out in 2020 about the NYPD practices, I don't agree with her. I didn't agree with her standpoint. I don't think Eric does. I don't think most cops won't. But for you to do that to a rape victim, I don't agree with that either, man. So, this is, again, it's an allegation right at this moment in time, but it's one that I believe happened just based upon all the things that I've seen about who he is. And again, still to this day, people call up asking where I live, where I work, trying to get information about me. And that comes from Schell's office, comes from Kinsilla's office. The Kamala Harris, the NYPD's office. It comes from, let me stop before, because getting a little, let me stop before I go too far. But whatever. You guys will all answer for that at some point when you listen to this. So we'll talk. We'll see you. We'll see you guys in court. You know, some of you underlings too.
Yeah, maybe when Commissioner Caban gets deposed, if you can speak in the same manner. I don't know. Refer to my counsel because apparently that's when he'll say, "I wasn't leading the department. It's not up to me." I mean, who is it up to? Who is the police commissioner? Because if you can't answer that simple question, please step down. Do us all a favor. Stop being an imposter. You're not the police commissioner. You know it. I mean, honestly, how does he do it? Every day he goes to the police academy, he goes home, and he has to pretend he's the police commissioner and pose in these pictures, and he knows it. I mean, how does that make you feel? I'm curious, Caban. How does that make you feel? Because I heard you were a nice guy. I heard you were pretty cool to go out with, maybe go to Concert Fritos and hang out with. But how does that make you feel? That you're supposed to be the police commissioner, but you deep down you know that you're not, and you can't even lie and say you're not because you couldn't even answer that simple question. I mean, you don't think those tweets are inappropriate? And if you think they're appropriate, then say so. So if your ideology was to support John Shelf, you wanted to support him because he's your buddy, well, you sure didn't. By you not answering the question and saying, well, let DOI answer for it and do the investigation, you didn't stand up for him. You would have been better off if you really want to say, listen, I support it. It might not be so, it's a little colorful. It might be something you're not used to, but times are evolving, times are changing, and I felt it was necessary. You may be wrong, but at least you stood up for him. But by you, again, having it on a mission, I guess that's the nature of the police department now. This is the new police department. This is the new era. We omit things. We just don't answer questions. Tariq Shepard was very good at it. Let's not answer questions unless it comes up organically. Where did you get that word from? Maybe John? I don't know, man. I think John used that word quite often. I hear a lot of words that are used on this podcast from probably these small voices have some good words. So it's quite interesting. But again, the police department is completely imploding. I'm embarrassed by it. I think that, and also I'm glad that you referenced when it comes to Dana Rachelin, if there was any question to, hey, listen, is her story have any validity to it? Was she actually smeared? Would they try to smear a girl that makes an allegation of rape? Because it sounds terrible, but I mean, just look at this. I mean, they're showing a pattern here. So you know what? I would side with Dana on this one. Johnny, I know you agree. It's just what's the best prediction of the future or what's happening? Just look at the past, and we just see complete unprofessionalism.
Absolutely. You know what I think of, like Ed Caban's appointment as the police commissioner and Keechant Sewell's. It's like Britain now, right? You have a prime minister and you have the king and the queen. And like Caban's like the king and the queen. So it's actually like, it's a pretty cool job because he gets to be the party police, right? Because he has all this esteem and he's the honorable, but he really doesn't control anything, He really has no say in anything, but we just throw stuff at him. He gets to wear the pin, the cool suits, $30,000 Rolex, all that stuff, It's so I would take that job, I don't know that I would sit back and let myself get embarrassed at one of these meetings like that. And if I thought that it was appropriate, I would say it. And if I thought it wasn't appropriate, I would say it, But I know damn for sure it wouldn't happen if I didn't want it to happen. You know what I mean? So, again, I don't believe that he's the true leader. And I think today really exposed that. And I think today really exposed who John Shell and Kaz Daughtry really are. They're cowardly, And I think that it's just, and then even in a bigger picture of the whole thing, when you look at that dais, you see the two cowards aren't on the dais. And you see the rest of them, you just see sheer incompetence across the board. And to me, I just see complete overhaul again. And it all comes down to one thing: who New York City mayor is and his appointments. He appointed all morons. Because I'll tell you right now, if it was myself sitting on that dais, if it was Eric sitting on that dais, yeah, there'll be some tough questions. And there'll be some things we're not going to have answers to. But we're not going to get abused and embarrassed like they did. That's for damn sure. Not by some crazy left-wing socialists who hate the police. Not going to happen, right? We're not going to be tough guys on Twitter and then not be able to hold ourselves in a professional manner and in public. I try to stay professional at all times. We joke around a lot on Twitter, but we really do try to stay professional. Other than that, but again, we're individuals. We're not representing an organization. If we were representing a esteemed organization like we did for 18 years, we'd be very silent and have very large, thick skin and wouldn't really respond to a lot of things. at all.
Oh,
Maybe we
New
would
York's
laugh about it.
finest.
We'll laugh about it.
New York's Finest Unfiltered podcast is an esteemed organization. I would have said that, but what's that?
But we could joke around now in public where we couldn't be. We had to save it for the locker room the other times.
Well, it is laughable though. Like honestly, my perception of this was, here's an opportunity. You know what? You say you support the men and women in blue, and that you're going to push back. Hey, listen. Not only am I going to push back on social media, I'm going to show up to this budget hearing, and I'm going to push back and tell you why I put these tweets out. And you know what? Even if that was going to be your last day in the NYPD, that would have been what a man does. Say, you know what? I made these tweets because I'm tired of you lefties. I'm tired of you abusing the police department. Here's why I did it. It's wrong, but it had to be said. Something. I'm not saying I agree with it totally, but something. Then you could say, you know what? I'm pushing back on social media, and I'm pushing back in person. But that's not what cowards do. And they show their true colors. I'm not a religious person, but you know what? John, you've said it before. What's the worst thing to be in the Bible? Not the thief, not the rapist, which is terrible, but what's the worst thing to be?
Yeah, a coward.
Coward.
Sorry, I was reading the Post article, the brass, that they were visibly absent from here. Wonder where they got that term from.
Yeah. Well, it's great. You know what? And I appreciate them calling us the small voices, because I guess it's those voices in your head that sometimes could create the most havoc for people. And it's those small voices that have been talking to you. Like, what would John and Eric say? So is that who you're really pushing back on? Why don't you tell the truth? We're pushing back on these two retired lieutenants. We're pushing back on Sal Greco. That's who we're pushing back on. But because you can't push back on us anymore because we've made an internal affairs complaint, you've now pushed your emotions and your anger in different directions. And it's just so out of control right now. Again, it goes back to egos over everything. Public safety takes a back seat. Ego's number one. That's what I say.
So Chris Sommerfeld from the Daily News, he tweeted, Mayor Adams' office didn't tell Chief John Schell and Deputy Commissioner Kaz Daughtry to blow off today's city council budget hearing until around 7 a.m., a few hours before it started, per sources. They were told not to go for fear it would create a circus. I think it already was a circus, but I also heard from some people on Instagram, they said that they didn't go because they knew that the meme apocalypse would happen. And it's going to happen anyway, so they might as well win.
Yeah. Well, it is a circus, and they're the clowns. And you know what? And we get to watch a show. But they created it. They created the circus. What? No one here has any strong leadership. And the tides have turned too far for Mayor Eric Adams to stand up and say, you know what? From now on, these are the boundaries. I don't think there are. You've said it, John. When you say that he's for and against, that means there's no boundaries. No one knows actually where the line is to be drawn. No one knows what side to be on what side of the aisle when it comes to Mayor Eric Adams. And we sure know the police department has no idea. Who actually runs this police department? Well, we know it's not Police Commissioner Ed Command. I think John's ideology, it's pretty laughable, but you hit the mark. You hit the target. Who actually runs the police department? Who runs day-to-day operations? Who would you say is ultimately running day-to-day operations?
Kaz Daughtry under the leadership of Philip Banks, under the leadership of Eric Adams.
So you say it's like a co-mayor operation. It's pretty much what it is for Eric Adams and Philip Banks. Absolutely. That's who's pulling the strings. Philip Banks. I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anything else before we wrap it up? I think we beat this up enough. The NYPD's on their investigation for social media practices. Good. They deserve it. It's about damn time.
Yeah. Honestly, at this point, I think you and I were very fair in the beginning, but if I saw them in handcuffs, it would be fine with me at this point. I really do believe, not just these tweets alone, everything they've been doing on social media, I think is an act of terror. Using the weight of the police department to push political ideology, I think it's an act of terror, and I think what they did to Sal Greco is just disgusting, and everyone should be paid for it. Sal Greco should be reinstated, compensated, vindicated, and that's my message. Thank you, everyone, to watching New York's Finest Retirement Unfiltered Podcast, 265 Police Live. John, close it out, brother.
That's it, baby. We'll be back at you. Remember the 265 Finest Unfiltered shirt for sale at Myers. Go online, pick those up. We're not making any more of those. The next shirt's going to be a completely different style. We're working with a retired cop now. We're going to create some other styles, but those won't be out for a while. So get those at Myers. Go to Myers link. Link will be wherever you watch or listen to this podcast. Please also like and subscribe. And if you can, give us a review. If you're on Apple or Spotify, help us move up in the rankings. Greatly appreciate everybody listening. Anybody that thinks we missed anything, as always, feel free. Let us know. I know you guys will. Be back at you.
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.